very good evening and welcome back to another panel discussion. My name is Mr. Sanchez and I'm the Chief Global Communication Officer at GCPIC and CIIES2021, and I'm taking great pleasure in hosting the rest of the sessions this evening. And without further ado, I would like to welcome our panelists for this session, Ms. Fiza Khalid, Mr. Rock Fajis, Mr. Ryan Edwards, and our moderator, Mr. Adam Lane, for the panel on how to build successful innovation ecosystem, best practices from Europe. So with that, I hand over the floor to Mr. Adam, our moderator for today. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, good evening, or good morning to you, wherever you happen to be in the world. My name is Adam Lane. I actually work at Huawei, based in Kenya, and I'll be moderating this session today. I'm very glad that we've got a mixture of people here, one lady and two gentlemen. So we have Rock Fajis, who's the Executive Manager of Peninsula Corporate Innovation in Barcelona, Spain, Fiza Khalid, who's a doctoral researcher in entrepreneurship and innovation at the University of Edinburgh Business School, and Ryan Edwards, who's a co-founder of Naked Innovations. So what I'm going to do is ask each of them to introduce themselves just for a minute to explain a bit more about what they do. And then we have a set of questions we're going to ask each of them, one or two at a time. If you also have questions, please raise them in the Q&A box, and we'll hopefully get to some of those before we run out of time. I know we started a bit late, and we'll do our best to get through them. So if I can ask Rock to start, briefly introduce yourself for 1 minute. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Rock Frazier, Executive Manager of Peninsula Corporate Innovation. I've been more than 15 years working in innovation projects and to helping corporates and SMEs, startups, public bodies and universities to build innovation and innovative projects. So I'm glad to be here to be able to explain you some of the key elements to build an ecosystem, an innovation ecosystem in the European context. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Rock. And now Fiza.
Hi everyone, this is Fiza. I'm a doctoral student, third year PhD student at University of Edinburgh Business School. I'm basically an engineer from degree, but then I'm moving on towards research side. So my career is mostly divided between working at telecom sector and academia. And for now, I'm researching on the idea of how the entrepreneurial models are moving from a very developed ecosystem, which is Silicon Valley, and coming down towards underdeveloped or growing ecosystems, and how we are taking on the entrepreneurial models and what we are changing and what we need to do, what's working, what's not working. So that's what I do. And other than that, I'm also working on a UKRI project for measuring the effects of COVID, what's happening in the entrepreneurial sector for around COVID. It's a longitudinal study. And other than that, I also work on some fintech projects. And I'm looking forward to interact with all of you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Fiza. And Ryan?
Hi, everyone. Yeah, so co-founder of Naked Innovations, 15 years in agri-food industry, working at a big corporate, and then 5 years ago started on my own entrepreneurship journey. And now really creating ecosystems within agri-food that drive innovation, connecting all the different stakeholders, especially in Europe, from the corporates to the regulators to research to provide a space for entrepreneurs to come together in a kind of open and transparent manner to collaborate around the major challenges that we see. So that's the space we play in, and delighted to be here.
Great, thank you very much, Ryan. So I think we'll start with Fiza, if that's okay. And maybe if Fiza can talk a bit about the innovation ecosystem in Europe, and especially the role of the academic sector in that.
Okay, so if in simple words, what I can come out of your European innovation ecosystem is like, I can define it in just 3 words. It's diverse, it's complex, and fortunately it's growing. So the idea is, like we can divide the European innovation ecosystem into, we can understand into 2 things, like either it's a one big block that you call it a European ecosystem, or it's a bunch of, different regions. If you come down towards, a whole European sector, so you have universities, community of investors, the whole government involved, European Commission involved. But then you come down towards the local level, there are local startups, there are regional initiatives, and there are entrepreneurial communities. They are working on in their own sector, in their own branch, in their own cities, in their own regions. What we need to understand is, like usually what I come across is people compare European ecosystem with the US ecosystem, but we need to understand that they are not same. They have all the stakeholders that we usually look into for an ecosystem. But what's important is that we need to understand that in Silicon Valley or in US ecosystem, the major players are corporate startups and investors from many universities. But when you come down to our European ecosystem, we have so many other things. We have cities, we have regions, we have local ministries, we have corporates, and then startups, local startups who are going big, startups who are moving international. So it's a complex thing that to study it as a whole or taking it different parts of it. But we usually, divide it into three contexts. The tier one are the high tech hubs, like you can say London, Berlin, or Paris, maybe Stockholm. But when you come down to the tier two, that's like comparatively, like tech cities and all. These are Barcelona, Zurich, Copenhagen, maybe Frankfurt. And then there are like even smaller specific issues that smaller communities that are developed against, like universities which have good business schools or technological sector, and they may be, like Madrid, Barcelona, they are like Budapest, they have their own communities coming up. But the idea that we need to understand is that it's a growing ecosystem, and any ecosystem, takes 6 to 7 or 8 years to develop and show that what's it happening, and we need to study it as it is. There are problems in that but we need to focus upon, like connections, competencies, and capital. There are problems, but we are everything, like the regulators and policies are working to figure out that. What we can say is for now is, like entrepreneurs are learning, entrepreneurs are growing, they're getting creative, they're getting ambitious, investors are going international, and then connections are getting, stronger. But there's a lot of momentum in innovation ecosystem of Europe, but still it needs to, work upon things that actually are important. We need to cut down extra things like cities, regions, and which you call it the barriers. You have to cut down the barriers and then rise as a one thing. Sorry. So that's what my perspective, like how do I see European innovation ecosystem. But when you come down to different things as an outsider or insider, so it's much more complex. But good thing is, it's improving.
Okay, thank you. Maybe we can next turn to Ryan and talk a bit about the role of partnerships. One of the key aspects that Ryan's involved with, and how he sees the partnerships between different actors in the innovation ecosystem.
Okay, cool. Yeah, thanks for asking. And I think building on what Frazier was saying at the start about complexity, cutting barriers, also mentioned, and diversity, I think all those things come together. And that's why partnerships are so important. I mean, going back a step, my background was I was running the innovation department in Europe for a very big food company, one of the biggest. And we didn't do partnerships. We believed we could do everything internally. We were very, very clever R&D people. And the reality was that a typical project would take at least 3 years to get through innovation funnel. And once it got commercialized, it would often fail. And that was one of the reasons I actually went on my entrepreneurship journey in these last 5 years, seeing in Europe that really to drive proper innovation to success around the big challenges. And I mean real innovation, not incremental innovation where we make a chocolate bar and make it bigger, or make dark chocolate or white chocolate and call that innovation, incremental. No, I'm talking about breakthrough innovation. It takes a systems approach across the whole dynamic of all the stakeholders, as Frazier was saying. So what we see more and more is, rather than starting with how can we grow our profit line from the corporates, there's a drive towards, well, what are our challenges? And let's see, and this is we're encouraging Naked Innovations, let's see what the common challenges are out there. What are the big challenges that are not getting solved? I mean, I say my background's agri-food, so we talk a lot about the how can we make the food industry healthier for the planet and healthier for people. So let's find challenges there and find partners, whether they're regulators, whether they're big corporates, whether they're investors, entrepreneurs as well, or research centers that want to solve those challenges and bring together their different skill sets, as Frazier was saying about diversity, different perspectives, bring that together and try and solve those challenges that way. And that, to me, is kind of the birth of these ecosystems. So it's really about this partnership. The challenge, and you talked about barriers earlier, the challenge is how to create a trusted environment where those partners want to come together and share and thrive. So I feel like partnerships are key, but finding the right partners and creating an environment where they are willing to collaborate is a big challenge, and one that we continue to try to tackle.
Great, thank you very much, Ryan. Maybe we can also now go to Rock. Maybe you can talk a bit more about the market conditions and the role of businesses in the success of the innovation ecosystem.
Yes, well, the market has a key role to create an innovation and innovative ecosystem. The market has to answer several questions. First of all, it has to work in an open mind way. So the market has to know that the innovation will come not just from only the corporates, but also and basically from the startups, but also from the tech and research centers and universities and SMEs. The market has to accept the dialogue between the different actors that Ryan answered about. So the corporations have to be able to talk to the SMEs and to the startups, but also the startups have to be able to understand which is the way of working of the corporates, and of course the academia and the research and tech centers, they have to work in the tempos of the market. So it's important that when this open mind is included into these nodes or these actors, then the innovation ecosystem is easier to get on. Apart from this, everything or the market is user-centered. Of course, the question is that the actors understand that they have to generate the innovation and the ecosystem through a user-centered way. And of course, there also has to be a support from the public bodies, not just with fiscal benefits, but also with programs and acceleration ways to help to join all these actors. And at the end, what the market asks is for open and plug and play solutions. From Peninsula, we have worked in several acceleration programs, and always the public sector is the one that has pushed these programs with the support of the corporations, and thanks to that, it has been able to then bring the startups and the technologies to generate this ecosystem.
Thank you, Rock. And just touch on you again. How do you think the role of profit then comes into it? You touched a bit about the fiscal incentives. Is profit really a key driver of the market, or are there other factors that are influencing the innovation ecosystem?
Well, of course, profit is one of the elements of the ecosystem, but it's not. I mean, it's not the only one, and of course, it's not the one. So if there is no sense of open mind and open ways to develop projects, you can have a good fiscal benefit that it won't be able to go on. Apart, you can also have the conditions help to go profits correctly. But if you haven't got academia, if you haven't got tech centers, if you haven't got research centers, if you haven't got a startup ecosystem that makes this dialogue and this interconnection work, it won't go on any intent of to create an innovation ecosystem.
Okay, thank you. Maybe back to you, Fiza. In terms of the role of academia, especially, what do you feel are the challenges then for academia in this ecosystem? I guess Europe's a bit special in that there's a lot of international collaboration within European academia, maybe more so than other continents of the world. How does that work well, or are there additional challenges that academia faces in its role in the ecosystem?
I think, the first thing is, like Rob was mentioning, we need to, connect all the stakeholders more compared to, working in isolation and their own silos. We need to work as a one entity. Because what we see is, in Europe we have some of the best universities in the world, but still, we don't see, we are not that much progressive as compared to the rest of the world. We don't see that much innovation coming in, or maybe, we lack in something. So there are challenges that academia is dealing with, and there are some challenges that the rest of the ecosystem has to work on. So we need to make connections. For example, whenever I attend any career fairs or anything, any university, you see all the big names over there. They're all the big corporations hiring from the university, but we never see startups hiring students over there. We never see their port, they are never into there. And when you talk to, startups and all that, so the one thing they mention is, especially in the context of Europe, they won't say, they lack capital. They say that we don't have talent. And that's sometimes the basic reason that they move on to, some other, they go international as well, because we don't really see, there's always people from Europe that are moving into startups or big corporations outside the Europe, compared to some people who's moving back to Europe or start working in Europe. So maybe, our startups need to take a, leap of faith and then hire your own students. I do understand that, we, as a graduate or something, in the university setup, we lack the commercially oriented research. But we have, research and technology organization that are working on different things. We just need to, work upon them. Then sometimes, I do understand that, scale-ups are a priority. Everybody wants to invest in a startup who's growing and is going towards a Series A or Series, some higher series, going into investment in terms of that. But there is also, we need to take a handhold, so startups who are just coming out of university, maybe university spin-outs, who are just starting off. So the capital needs to flow somewhere as well. We need to invest in trial and error as well to actually have something. We have seen many good startups coming out of universities. Many faculties are starting, or research students are starting their own startups. But we need to, make connections so that the investors, the SMEs are more connected to the university, because innovation is not just one, it's not just coming from the university or not just coming from startups. It's coming from the both side, and you have to integrate the two connections. They have the capability now that you see, initially there weren't so many entrepreneurial courses, but now that I see more and more students, there are more courses offered by the universities, and then there are many students who are enlisted even from, not even just from the business or technology side, they are from any concept. They are coming with, they are taking the entrepreneurial courses, and which are really helpful for giving them a good hand of that how it's going to be and how do you commercialize a product. So the effort has to be taken, you just can't have that, okay, academia can do that or the rest of the ecosystem are different. That's the whole component that's actually going to grow the whole ecosystem, the innovation ecosystem. So we need to work upon as one entity, not just, on one side.
Thank you, Fiza. Maybe now we can turn to Ryan. I think working in the agriculture space, you also, I guess, work a lot with academia, or at least scientists in some sense as well. You mentioned a lot about the user focus before. How do you balance that aspect of the user versus the scientist or the producer, as well, of course, as in agriculture? I guess a lot of the production is also by farmers, whether domestic, international, and so on. So it's quite a complicated ecosystem. It's not just making a product in a lab or in a factory and it's done, right? There's a very complicated supply and demand aspect to it as well.
Yeah, absolutely, Adam. It is complex, and sometimes it's been too simplified. So a lot of the innovation drive we've seen in agri-food in the recent years has been at the consumer side. So the last mile, so supermarkets, delivering the food to the people, especially during COVID. These kind of innovations were at that end. And we've seen less innovations across the supply chain from farm all the way to your table. What we've definitely noticed, building on what Frazier said, is there's some amazing academia in Europe, some of the best in the world, and the innovation or the technologies and the concepts they come up with. Some of them, of course, do get commercialized, but so much of it, and we're seeing this right now in agri-food, and we are working on the program to try and solve this, because one of the challenges we see is that a lot of the IP doesn't get commercialized. It stays within the universities, the research centers. And why is that? Often, they don't. The university doesn't know how to commercialize, or it's tried and it's failed. And what we're trying to do now is bring together the tech side of academia with more the entrepreneurial business side, and try to give them a home where they connect to each other at the start. So again, as I was saying before, we start with the challenge and then find those interesting technologies and interesting people who know about developing a technology with interesting entrepreneurs or business people who know how to commercialize and take to market, understand the demands, and matching all those points. What we have seen really, and that's a program we're developing right now. What has been improving a lot has been the connection between academia and agriculture. So we're going through, just to finish on this, we're going through a huge transformation right now in agriculture, where in Europe the demographics of the farmers is they're getting into their 60s and 70 years old, and they're retiring. And their children, some of them reluctantly, are now taking over these farms, and they've got a more, in general, they're open to trying to innovate. So we're seeing more and more of them connecting to academia, using their farms as testing grounds to try out new innovations. We're seeing more and more innovation space through Internet of Things, through drone technology, vertical farming. There's a lot more happening in that space, and I think a part of it is demographics. So I think that'll speed up as we see more of this generational change on the farm side as well. But yeah, indeed, connecting all those elements is tough, and that's why I think if we focus on the challenge, then we can look at all the elements rather than trying to just focus on a technological solution first. Start with the challenge first.
Great, thank you, Ryan. And now we'll turn to Rock. Rock, as you reflect on some of these things, as well as what you said earlier, what do you think is missing then? What do we need to do a bit more of? What do we need to do differently than we're doing at the moment then to have more innovation in Europe? Whether that should be at bigger scale. Europe's often complaining that they haven't got big, listed tech companies, for example. Is that a problem? Is it another problem? Is there still a thriving startup environment, and that's okay without huge, massive success stories? Or what's your thought around that?
Well, my thought is that to generate innovation, so in the innovation race worldwide, Europe as the European Union has a difficult job to be done, because there are different markets, there are different governments, and there are different interests. Okay. Saying that, with this element, it's difficult to go on. But on the other hand, we have got lots and lots of private and social private initiatives, or societal and private initiatives that make the things go on fastly. So the thing is that the companies and the corporations, the startups ecosystem and the SME ecosystem are working with the academia and with the tech centers, sometimes in parallel on what the governments are doing. The thing is that in some moments we can match together because the governments create those acceleration programs that I told you. But if this doesn't happen, the companies go by this side. But of course, in the global area, I think that Europe it has an important job to be done, and basically it's related with focus in some elements that can be key for the future. I've got hope because actually the new European Commission has a specific focus. It's the green economy, and to create Europe as a neutral continent in gas emissions. So a green Europe actually is the goal and the focus. So perhaps if we move through that, sustainability, technology, and everything that is related with that, we can create an innovation project together, or unified, that can compete with the other world power in innovative areas. Okay. I don't know if
Thank you very much. Yeah, that's great work. Thank you.
The idea.
Yeah, we have about 10 minutes left, so if anyone's listening and has questions, please raise them in the Q&A tab on the system, and we'll try and get to them just before we wrap up. I don't see any questions at the moment, so I want to also ask then Frazier what her thoughts are then in terms of what's missing or what we need to do differently to have more innovation in Europe.
I think what I compare, like different ecosystems. So what I see is in terms of like European startups or some European entrepreneurs, what they do is they start very small and then establish in a market, and then they like start looking around and then move into different regions and moving into adjacent countries and all, and then they start working on that. Whereas, because I feel like they are very much into, like the rules and regulations that we are going to follow. And we usually, like when we compare, so there's one thing that we always say is that European startups ask for, permission, whereas US startups ask for forgiveness. Because when you see like Uber or Facebook moving in somewhere, so then what they do is like, we'll do it and then we'll see what happens and we'll fix it. Whereas when you come down to the European startups and entrepreneurs, they follow the regulations and then they're like, this is what we are going to do, and this is how it will happen. They take a lot of time, like planning, making the prototype. When you even, like go for the pitch presentations and all, they have their own, the whole product or prototype ready. Whereas when you go for US, they have the idea, they publicize, they market it, and then after that, after the investment, they start working on it. So maybe, like the European entrepreneurs or European innovation ecosystem is putting so much effort in innovation and in building the product rather than, like just taking it and then, like just speaking out of it and then making the product later on. So it's kind of, like a tactic thing that they are saying a lot, but probably European innovation ecosystem is doing a lot. Because we have seen, like a very, very good startups coming out of Europe. There's BlaBlaCar from Paris, and they, like started from Paris, they move on to the whole Europe, then they move on towards, Latin America, and I think Asia. Their model is being followed. Then we have SoundCloud, we have Deezer, we have Spotify. They're all coming out of Europe, but still, like they're not taken too big because they lack in marketing. and then they have taken time in terms of establishing the product rather than like moving towards the mission and what we are supposed to do. So kind of it's kind of changing the mindset of how you take a startup or how you're supposed to do. And then sometimes I think they don't really look into going international and actually coming out of an exit. They run it as a business, not as a startup.
Okay, thank you, Fiza. I'll just come back to Rock, and then after Rock, go back to Ryan. Rock, maybe you focus a little bit on corporate innovation. Where do you see the differences in the different cities in Europe? Where would a corporate look to focus on innovation hubs? And how do you see the corporates can work more with startups or not in order to reach scale, I suppose?
Mm-hmm. Well, what we see from our projects is that corporates they are moving through innovation with startups when the startups are mature. So not with startups that begin, but with startups that have 2 or 3 years. So this is the first element. So perhaps 5 years ago, they were very fast trying to find startups that could help them, and they didn't look at the maturity of the project. But now they have realized that if they want to go on, they need to have a solution, a mature solution. Then to when they choose to locate in an innovation hub, the corporates they want flexibility, they want talent, they want to find talent, they want to find how to meet technology like tech center, of course public support, but basically the interconnection with other hubs. So they don't find isolated hubs, but they want hubs that can be interconnected with other hubs globally, because then they are able to find solutions not only in the hub but with other hubs globally. So at the end, that's the key element to find fast solutions and maturity in the own market.
Thank you very much, Rock. Ryan, what's your thought then about the world of corporate innovation? Anything else to add on what Rock said? I think it's really interesting what he said about having innovation hubs in different cities and so on.
Absolutely. I see that too. I see exactly what Rock sees. In conversations I've been having with some of the biggest food companies in the world in recent weeks, fortunately we get to talk to some of their innovation directors, and I've heard from several of them, startup cult, startup fatigue. I'm bored of startups. One of them told me, he's based in Israel, and he told me he sees between 50 to 100 startups a week, all doing the same type of pitching, all in the same space, all claiming to be unique and the best ever. So if you're in that corporate position, the startup, of course, for them, it's a big deal. They think they are unique. But from the corporate side, they're seeing this the same over and over. So we've got to find a way of, we're coming to this saturation point. And I think the corporates want to see entrepreneurship or innovation done now in a slightly different way. And that's why I keep coming back to purpose-led, challenge-based innovation, which is about the ecosystem. I think in a way we've put too much hope and too much emphasis on startups and entrepreneurs, and they are still very, very important. But I think we got to build these ecosystems to support them, and have them not just driven, what I see a lot, driven by technology. And often we see the technology person becoming the CEO rather than being the CTO of that corporate, of that startup. So I believe that, I hear already a lot recently that some of the corporations are getting bored of startups and wondering how can we find solutions to our challenges in a different way. There's also been something I heard from a couple of them Like, actually, we've spent the last 10 years learning from startups. We now know how to do innovation ourselves. And I think there might be a risk of corporates now closing in a little bit again and saying, we've learned a lot of lessons. We might still stay connected to a few startups, but the doors are maybe closing slightly if we're not careful. So yeah, that's what I'm seeing. These are not opinions. These are just what I'm seeing right now, what I'm hearing in the market.
All right, thank you very much, Ryan. I think we'll just have one last question each for you then, as we wrap up, as we come into them. Maybe I could just ask a more interesting question. If you've seen any failures or anything that has gone wrong, or the biggest common mistake somebody has made, maybe we'll start with Rock and then go to Frazier and then finish with Ryan. And then I think we'll be at the end of our session.
The mistake of who?
Of somebody working on innovation in Europe. It's up to you whether you want to pick a corporate or academia or more general.
Well, there is a common failure with corporates that is to so they feel that so a common failure is that they think that a startup has to be like them in the way of working. And if there is not a middle person that can be able to help to reach the two ways of work and of speak, it won't go on anything. But it's curious because knowing that this is a common mistake, that is, they feel that it will work perfectly, but it always fails this element.
Okay. Thank you very much, Rock. And Fiza?
I won't specifically quote any specific person, but I can just talk about like the common things that we face. Like people put so much effort in terms of internationalizing or finding the right capital at the right time. But initially, like when you are going to run a startup, it was like that. You need $50,000 and an office, maybe a garage to run a startup. But people put up so much thought in finding the capital rather than just analyzing. Now you can have, like in just $5,000, you can run your business on Amazon Web Services, and just with a laptop. So there is not just the problem of capital, because that's something everyone keeps on talking, that we don't have a single point capital, and then that can be used in all over the Europe. But then the problem is finding the right talent, relocating your company, and the right time to do that. Not waiting too long for that, rather than moving into staying in one place rather than going international. Like taking on your opportunities rather than waiting for too long.
All right, thanks very much, Fiza. And then finally, Ryan.
Yeah, one that I was actually connected to, and I can name the company. So Unilever, who own Ben and Jerry's, we talk about ice cream. Lots of people love ice cream. Basically, they saw their marketeers, the marketing team saw there was a change in consumers that wanted to have healthier ice cream. That was a clue, a clear, interesting challenge. Unfortunately, that challenge internally got taken by the R&D team, and they focused on trying to develop healthier ice cream, but they found that the texture and the taste just was not quite at the perfect level. They couldn't find the perfect technological solution. So that big challenge that existed, a huge industry trend, got put to the side, ignored. What happened? Some of you may know a company called Halo Top in the USA. They're now in Europe as well. It was 10 guys came together, created similar to Ben & Jerry's buckets of ice cream. Maybe don't taste quite the same, have quite the mouthfeel, but is a multi-billion-dollar company in less than 10 years. They took a big slice of Ben & Jerry's market share because they were willing to focus on the challenge rather than just trying to make the perfect technology. That's my message. We've got to look at both. So yeah, that was a big failure, a multi-billion-dollar failure. by a very smart company.
Wonderful. All right, thank you very much, all three of you. I think that was really interesting. I think you've learned a lot and certainly highlighted some of the key questions and challenges around the ecosystem. I think issues around culture, incentives, motivation have come out a few times, whether people are focusing on scale too much, whether they're not going to work between academia and business or between startups and large corporations. I think it's really interesting to look at those kind of key challenges. It's not just as simple as throwing more money at the problem or throwing more policies at the problem, as sometimes politicians may like to think. So I think with that, we've come to the end of our session. I want to thank our three panelists for spending the time to share with us today. And I hope if you found it helpful, you'll also share the recording with other people. They can also watch it. And I guess get in touch with any of us, I guess, through LinkedIn if you have further questions or through the organizers of the conference. So thank you very much, everyone. And thank you very much to our panelists again. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Adam, Mr. Rock, Mr. Ryan, and Ms. Frazier for joining us today. And that was a very insightful session. And thank you, Mr. Adam, for the great moderation and the summing up. And we'll stay connected and see you all in the further sessions. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.